He used to tell me I was too ordinary for the life he wanted. That I didn't shine in a crowd. That my dreams were small, my voice too quiet, my world too safe. Funny how things change. The night I walked into his engagement party, wearing a scarlet dress that made people stop mid-sentence and clutch their pearls, I didn't need to say a word. The room shifted. And when my boyfriend extended his hand to the hostess, introducing himself as Damen Westwood, a name that made CEOs sweat and tabloids speculate, the silence was almost reverent. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to how this all started. To a rainy Thursday, 2 years after my divorce, in a corner cafe with fogged-up windows and the smell of burnt espresso. I was sketching designs for a boutique hotel in Napa, my first major client, when the bell above the door jingled. And in walked Brandon. Yes, that Brandon. My ex-husband. The man who used to roll his eyes at my architecture books, who said I was too artsy for dinner parties, who kissed my cheek like it was an obligation. The same man who now looked freshly pressed in a tailored charcoal suit, smiling like he hadn't once shredded my self-worth with a sentence that still echoed, "I need someone who helps me rise, not holds me back." He hadn't seen me yet. I debated ducking behind my laptop, but it was too late. He spotted me. And just like that, our worlds collided again. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Brandon slid into the seat across from me like he owned the place, ignoring the line of customers still waiting for a table. That had always been his way, cutting corners with a smile, expecting the world to move for him. "Natalie," he said, with that trademark half-grin. "Didn't expect to see you here. You look good." It was the pause before good that told me everything. He was surprised. Maybe even impressed. I wore a navy blouse, no makeup beyond tinted lip balm, hair loosely tied. Nothing about me screamed success, but I had never needed to. "Likewise," I said, taking a slow sip of my lukewarm coffee. He scanned the room like he was bored already. "You still designing, interiors or whatever?" "Architecture," I corrected. "My firm just signed with a boutique hotel group." His brows rose, a flicker of something passing across his face, respect or jealousy, I couldn't tell. "Wow. Didn't think you'd stick with that after everything." "After you left, you mean?" "After you took every ounce of confidence I had and ran with someone shinier." "But I didn't say that." I just nodded. "And you?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. My friend Amira had sent me enough Instagram screenshots over the last year. Brandon and Vanessa, his new fiancée, smiling on yachts, sipping champagne at galas, tagging high-end brands like they were birthrights. "I'm doing well," he said, adjusting his cufflink like it held the answer. "Vanessa and I are planning our engagement party. Should be quite the night." "Of course you are," I thought. "And of course, you'd bring it up 5 minutes into seeing your ex-wife." The door jingled again. And that's when Damen walked in. Tall, composed, dressed in a navy overcoat that looked simple, until you noticed the stitching. He carried no umbrella, no briefcase. Just presence. He saw me, smiled, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over." "No problem," I said, already feeling more grounded by his voice than I had all morning. Brandon's eyes narrowed slightly. "And this is?" I turned, calm and clear. "Brandon, this is Damen Westwood." "Damen, Brandon Walsh, my ex-husband." The men shook hands. Damen's grip was steady. Brandon's smile faltered just slightly. "Nice to meet you," Damen said smoothly. Brandon glanced between us, likely calculating. Damen didn't have the flashy bravado Brandon had always gravitated toward. No oversized watch, no exaggerated handshake. But something about him made Brandon sit straighter. "We should go," Damen said gently. "I've got a table reserved." As we stood, Brandon added, "Tell Vanessa I said hello. She'll be thrilled to know we ran into each other." I smiled politely. I'm sure she will. But inside, I was already thinking, you really have no idea what's coming. And neither did I. Let's keep going. That evening, I stood barefoot in my living room, flipping through an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. It still smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. A younger version of me smiled back in every frame: weddings, vacations, blurry birthday candles. And beside me, always, was Brandon. His arm slung casually over my shoulder, a hand wrapped possessively around my waist. Back then, I thought it was love. Now I could see it for what it really was: performance. My phone buzzed. It was Amira, my best friend since college and the one person who'd seen me unravel and rebuild, thread by painful thread. She didn't even wait for me to say hello. "You're not going to believe this," she blurted. "I just got an invite to Brandon and Vanessa's engagement party." My heart stuttered. I sat down on the couch, the album sliding off my lap. "You got invited?" "Yeah. And guess what? So did half the people we knew from college. It's going to be massive. Black tie, rooftop, open bar. You know, the whole look how great we are affair." I laughed softly, bitter at the edges. "Sounds like him." "There's more," Amira added. "The envelope?" It wasn't from Brandon. It was from Vanessa. And it said, specifically, "We'd love for you and Natalie to attend." I froze. Vanessa had invited me? Personally? She's inviting me to their engagement party? I said slowly, trying to make sense of it. "Girl, it's either the boldest flex or the pettiest move in modern history," Amira said. "I swear she wants you to show up just to see what she won." I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew Amira was right. I stared across the room at the dress hanging on the back of my closet door. Emerald green. Sleek. Untouched. I had bought it a month ago on impulse, thinking, one day, I'll have somewhere to wear this. And maybe that day had just arrived. Before I could spiral, my phone buzzed again. "Damen, dinner tomorrow? Or are you hiding from me already?" I smiled for real this time. Damen never pushed. Never tried to control the narrative or outshine me. He simply showed up. I typed back, "Dinner. But only if you let me order dessert first." He replied instantly, "Deal. But only if it's chocolate." I glanced again at the album, then quietly slid it back onto the shelf. This chapter? It had already been written. It was time for a new one. One I would write myself. On my terms. With someone who didn't just see me, but believed in me. And soon, everyone else would see it too. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen counter as I made coffee, the steam curling upward like quiet thoughts I hadn't said out loud yet. The invitation was still there, tucked under a bowl of oranges like a dare. Vanessa's handwriting was elegant, confident. Almost rehearsed. "We'd be delighted to have you join us as we celebrate the beginning of forever." What a line. I stared at it as if it might change if I blinked. But it didn't. It stayed exactly the same, smug, intentional, and covered in gold leaf. I picked up my phone and dialed Damen. "Good morning," he answered, voice warm and low. "I need your opinion on something," I said, getting straight to it. "Sounds serious," he teased gently. "Should I sit down?" "Actually, maybe," I said. "Brandon's engagement party is next weekend. Vanessa invited me. Personally." There was a beat of silence, then, "That's bold." "She knew exactly what she was doing," I said. "It's not just an invite. It's a message. She wants to show you what you've lost," Damen said calmly. "More like what she thinks I've lost," I corrected. Damen chuckled. "That's the Natalie I know. But the thing is," I said, my voice softening, "I don't know if going is petty, or powerful." "Do you want to go?" he asked. No pressure. Just curiosity. "I think I need to," I admitted. "Not for them. For me." I want to walk into that room and feel like I've healed. Like I'm not carrying the weight of that marriage anymore. Like I'm finally free. There was a pause, then his voice again, quiet and certain. Then I'll be by your side. Wherever you go. I swallowed hard, eyes stinging unexpectedly. Damen didn't offer grand gestures. He didn't make promises wrapped in diamonds or drama. But his presence? It was unwavering. Thank you, I whispered. Later that afternoon, I pulled the emerald dress from my closet. It shimmered faintly under the light, regal without trying too hard. I held it up to myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see the woman Brandon used to tear down. I saw someone who had survived. Someone who had rebuilt. Someone who would walk into that party, not to prove anything, but to simply be. And that, I realized, was more powerful than any revenge. The day of the gala came cloaked in a velvet sky, the kind of evening where even the city lights felt like they were holding their breath. I stood before the mirror in Damon's penthouse, smoothing the lines of my emerald gown. It hugged my waist, draped over my shoulders like quiet armor. My hair was swept into soft waves, the way I used to wear it before I started shrinking myself. Behind me, Damen adjusted the cuffs of his tailored tuxedo. When he turned, he paused for a moment, just long enough to make my stomach flutter. "You look breathtaking," he said, voice low and steady. I smiled. "You're not so bad yourself." We arrived at the Four Seasons just after 8. The valet opened our car door, and flashes from waiting cameras stuttered like fireworks as other guests stepped onto the carpet. This was no casual gathering. This was Brandon and Vanessa's grand performance. The lobby had been transformed into a ballroom dripping in silver and white. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. Strings of orchids hung from the ceiling, and soft classical music floated through the air like expensive perfume. And there he was. Brandon. Standing beside Vanessa near the bar, laughing too loudly at something she said. She wore a gown that clung to her like a designer secret. Her diamond ring could have lit a small village. For a brief second, he didn't see us. But when he did, his smile faltered. He blinked, as if trying to decide if what he was seeing was real. Then Vanessa followed his gaze. And for a moment, just a breath, her expression cracked. It was subtle, but I saw it, the flicker of surprise, the microsecond of reevaluation. Damen and I crossed the ballroom slowly, deliberately. I could feel eyes on us. Whispers behind flutes of champagne. And when we reached them, Damen extended his hand to Brandon first. "Brandon," he said, polite but firm. "Good to see you again." Brandon took it, his grip tight. "You too. Didn't expect to see you both tonight." I looked him straight in the eye. "Didn't you?" Vanessa leaned in. "Natalie, I'm so glad you could make it. You look absolutely stunning." It was the kind of compliment that dripped sugar but left a metallic aftertaste. "Thank you," I replied smoothly. This was such a thoughtful invitation. She smiled wider. "Well, we believe in showing grace. Especially to those from the past." Brandon chuckled under his breath. "Yes. It's nice to know everyone's moved on." I tilted my head. "Oh, I have." And just then, Damen slipped his arm gently around my waist, not possessive, but protective. Grounding. Vanessa's eyes flicked to his hand, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that wasn't confidence. It was calculation. Maybe even concern. The music swelled as another couple entered, and the moment passed. But the shift had already happened. I wasn't the ghost of Brandon's past anymore. I was the woman standing in front of them, real, radiant, and unbothered. And the night had only just begun. We moved through the ballroom like we belonged there, because we did. Damen greeted people with that quiet grace he carried so effortlessly, and I matched his steps, his rhythm, like we'd done this 100 times before. I caught glimpses of stunned expressions, of people nudging each other, whispering as they tried to piece it all together. Natalie Carter, once the quiet wife of Brandon Walsh, now standing beside someone like him. We paused by the gallery wall, photos of charity missions, construction sites in rural areas, portraits of smiling children the fundraiser would benefit. Damen leaned in close, not for affection, but so only I could hear. "You doing okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Better than I thought I would." "You have nothing to prove to anyone in this room," he said. "Least of all him." I looked up at him, grateful. "That's the thing. I'm not here for him." Just then, an all too familiar voice cut through the air behind us. "Natalie Carter. It is you." We turned. David Russell. Brandon's old college friend. The kind who always treated conversations like networking opportunities. He looked me up and down with the smugness of someone who'd already drawn conclusions. "I barely recognized you," he said. "Wow. Look at you. Quite the upgrade." I smiled without warmth. "Nice to see you too, David." He turned to Damen, offering his hand. "And you are?" "Damen Westwood," Damen replied, calm as ever. David's eyes widened slightly. "That Damen Westwood?" "The one and only," Damen said with a polite smile, and for once, David had no quick comeback. "Well, you two certainly make an impression," he muttered, then added with a smirk, "Brandon's going to love this." When he walked away, I exhaled slowly. "I forgot how exhausting that man is," I said. Damen reached for my hand. "You want to go?" "Not yet." I scanned the room, and my eyes landed on Brandon across the dance floor. He was watching us. Not talking. Not smiling. Just staring. And suddenly, I didn't feel like the underdog anymore. He looked like the one who didn't know where he stood. "I think," I said slowly, "I finally understand something." Damen looked at me. "I spent so long thinking I lost to Vanessa. But really, I won. I got out." Damen said nothing. He just squeezed my hand. And in that moment, the past felt smaller than it ever had. And the future? It finally felt like mine. We made our way toward the terrace, a quiet escape from the buzz of champagne flutes and polished conversations echoing through the ballroom. Cool night air kissed my shoulders as I stepped outside, the city skyline glittering like a constellation of second chances. Damen joined me, hands in his pockets, the way he always stood when he was reading a room, or, in this case, reading me. "You've been quiet," he said gently. I looked out at the glowing horizon. It's surreal, isn't it? Standing here, in their world. Only, it doesn't feel like there's any more. It feels like I'm just visiting. And I get to leave. He tilted his head, smiling. Isn't that the best kind of power? Choosing to walk away from something that once held you hostage. I let out a soft laugh. You make it sound so simple. It becomes simple, he said, when you stop needing their validation. For a moment, I didn't answer. Then I said, I used to imagine this moment. Not like this, of course. I pictured storming into a room, yelling, proving something. Making him regret everything. And now? Damen asked. Now I don't need him to regret it, I said. Because I don't regret it. Not anymore. We stood in silence, the kind that felt like peace. But that peace didn't last. From inside, a small disturbance began to ripple across the ballroom, a rising murmur. Damen turned slightly, eyes narrowing. Then the doors opened. A security guard approached us, headset tucked into one ear. Excuse me, sir, he said, addressing Damen, may I have a word? Damen stepped forward calmly. Is there a problem? We've been asked to verify your credentials, the guard said, professional but firm. There was a concern raised. I felt my stomach knot. A concern? Damen asked. I'm sorry, sir, but we've been told you may not be who you say you are. Before I could speak, Brandon appeared behind the guard, straightening his tie like he wasn't the one pulling the strings. Vanessa hovered behind him, her expression unreadable. "I'm sure it's nothing," Brandon said smoothly. "Just a precaution. You understand, I'm sure." My voice came sharper than I expected. "You invited us. And now you're having Damen vetted like some kind of criminal?" Damen touched my arm, steadying me. His voice was calm. "It's fine. Let them check." The security guard nodded and stepped aside to make a call. Brandon turned to Damen with a smirk. "I mean, we barely know anything about you, right? Where you're from, what you do." Before he could finish, Damen reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim black card, and handed it to the guard. "Tell them to call that number," he said. "They'll confirm everything." The guard stepped away. Vanessa took a slow breath, her eyes flicking from Damen to me. "This wasn't personal," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. "Oh, I think it was," I replied. "You wanted a show. Be careful what you ask for." And as the door closed behind the guard, a strange silence settled between us all. A silence pregnant with consequence. Something was coming. And this time, I wasn't afraid of it. The ballroom was frozen. 100 glittering guests fell silent, as if someone had pressed pause on a movie right at the part where everything shifts. The security guard returned, holding Damen's sleek black card between his fingers like it might burn him. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Westwood's credentials have been confirmed. He's exactly who he says he is." And just like that, the tension in the room snapped. You could hear the air suck back into people's lungs. A few guests looked down at their drinks awkwardly. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Vanessa stiffened. Her painted-on smile began to crack. Brandon blinked, as if the world had tilted under his feet. "Wait, what credentials?" The guard, now clearly uncomfortable, answered anyway. "Mr. Westwood is a principal investor in Archite Tech, Blue Horizon Capital, and a senior patron of the Westwood Foundation. There's also confirmation from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Forbes." Whispers rippled. Archite Tech? Blue Horizon? Westwood Foundation? Everyone knew those names. I saw it then, the exact second Brandon realized he hadn't just tried to humiliate a random man. He had tried to discredit a man who owned half the room. Damen stepped forward, calm as ever. "Next time, Brandon," he said, voice smooth like cut glass, "if you have a concern, maybe talk to me directly instead of sending security to create a scene." Brandon sputtered, "It was just a precaution." "No," I cut in. "It was petty. You wanted to shame me by questioning him. But the only thing you revealed tonight is your own insecurity." Vanessa opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Damen turned to her, eyes cool but not cruel. "We came here out of politeness. But you've made it clear this wasn't a party, it was a stage." He took my hand again, steady and warm. "And we don't need to be part of your performance." We turned and walked away, each step echoing louder than any words. Behind us, the room slowly began to buzz again, people whispering, phones appearing in hands. The headlines were already writing themselves. At the exit, Amira caught up with us. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea they'd pull something like that." I smiled. Neither did they. We stepped into the night, the cool air feeling different now, cleaner. Lighter. As Damen opened the car door for me, he looked at me and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "I think for the first time in a long while. I am." And as we pulled away, I didn't look back. Not once. 3 days later, the fallout began. It started quietly, an article in a business newsletter about the gala incident. A subtle headline, "Tech Tycoon Publicly Confronted at Engagement Gala, Then Leaves in Triumph." They didn't name Brandon or Vanessa outright, but everyone who mattered knew who had made the call. Then came the whispers from the donor community. Several key contributors began pulling out of Brandon's upcoming real estate project. One of them even reached out to Damen's foundation, an invitation to collaborate. The shift was seismic. Brandon tried to do damage control. I knew this because Amira sent me screenshots. He was giving interviews, trying to reframe the night as a misunderstanding. But there's only so much spin you can do when the man you tried to humiliate turns out to own a controlling stake in the very tech firm that backs your mobile property apps. Vanessa? She vanished from social media for a full week. But the final blow came from someone I didn't expect. Patricia Walsh, Brandon's mother. She called me. I let it go to voicemail, of course. But the transcript was sent automatically. Natalie. I won't pretend to like you. But I underestimated you. You held your own. I don't know if Vanessa is what Brandon needs anymore. I suppose we'll all see, won't we? That alone felt like a confession. Not of guilt, but of defeat. And the part of me that used to flinch in her presence? Didn't feel anything at all. Meanwhile, Damen and I got quiet together. Not the kind of silence that comes from uncertainty, but the kind you find when you've said everything that needed to be said. When a storm passes and there's nothing but calm. We walked by the water one evening, his hand brushing mine as the sun dipped behind the Golden Gate. You know, I said, if someone had told me 2 years ago I'd be here, after all of that, I would have laughed in their face. Damen glanced at me. Not because you didn't think you were capable. But because you'd been told for so long that you weren't. I looked out over the bay. Exactly. He was quiet for a beat. I didn't fall in love with you because of what you survived, he said. I fell in love because of how you survived it. And in that moment, I realized. This wasn't just about walking away from my past. It was about walking into my future with my head held high, and finally feeling like I belonged there. Not because of who I stood next to. But because of who I had become. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the mirror in my new design studio, my studio. The walls were still half painted, the desk was covered in sketches, fabric swatches, half-full coffee cups. But it was mine. Every inch of it. No longer a corner in someone else's office. No longer an afterthought. I reached for the nameplate I'd just unpacked. Brushed off the dust. Natalie Carter, founder and creative director. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. But inside, I was calm. Free. I had spent so long thinking closure would come from someone else, an apology, a reckoning, a regret. But standing here, I knew now, closure was never about what they gave me. It was about what I finally chose to take back. My name. My pride. My life. That night, Damen and I had dinner at home. Nothing fancy. Just us. Pasta, wine, records spinning softly in the background. Halfway through, he leaned across the table and asked, if you could say one thing to your old self, the woman who once thought losing him would break her forever, what would it be? I didn't even have to think. I smiled. I'd tell her, thank you. For not giving up. For enduring long enough to remember who she was before she was ever someone's wife. He nodded, lifting his glass. To remembering who we are. I clinked mine gently. To choosing who we become. And we toasted, not to revenge or victory, but to wholeness. Because in the end, this wasn't just about proving Brandon wrong. It was about proving me right. About the quiet resilience of rebuilding. About the strange, beautiful strength that blooms after everything falls apart. And as I stood on our balcony later that night, wind playing in my hair, I whispered one final truth to the dark. I didn't move on just to survive. I moved on to thrive. And I did. This time on my terms.